Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Giuliano, and I'm the Chief Research Officer for the Specialty Coffee Association. I'm joined by my colleague, Heather Ward, who's Content Strategy Director for the Specialty Coffee Association. And we're here to share some results of a survey that we did regarding the advent of COVID-19 and its impact on the specialty coffee industry. So I'll just go ahead and begin. We're going to talk a little bit about the survey, share some results of the survey, talk about some tools that we learned that will provide a way forward, and then we'll have time for some questions. If you have some questions, please raise your hand and use the GoToMeeting to type them in, and then we'll be able to address them at the end of the webinar. So to begin, a few weeks ago, when it became clear that COVID-19 was going to have an impact on our collective retail industry, a colleague of ours from the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute, named Carla Martin, launched a flash poll meant to assess the impacts to the craft chocolate industry, and we were inspired by that. So we engaged with Carla and learned from her some of the things that were working well in her poll, and we adapted that poll for use in the specialty coffee context. So right away we launched a poll meant to assess the way that businesses were being impacted by the closures, the shelter-in-place orders, et cetera, from COVID-19. So we're going to take the next few minutes to share the results of that poll. Now, a couple of caveats to begin with. One is that there is certainly some selection bias here. We made an open call for participation. People participated. And it's clear that probably some of the people that were participating were some of the most affected by what was happening. Others were simply too busy to respond and couldn't respond. So this is going to give us a snapshot of what's happening, but there's some caveats about response bias here. So I guess with that, I just want to thank not only Heather, also Katie Vonderleith helped us compile these, and she's with the research project manager for the Specialty Coffee Association and the Coffee Science Foundation, and helped us collate and understand these responses a little bit better. So Heather is going to take you through a few of these responses, and we'll discuss them as we go. Heather?
Okay, great. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks Peter for the introduction. So the survey went out, it was open for about a week, a little over a week, March 17th through 25th. We were targeting all businesses throughout the supply chain, from producers to retailers. The plan, you'll notice throughout as I'm going through the findings, we designed the survey to also do this survey again. So gathering the sentiment, not only at that time, that week, but also in the future, we plan to deploy some more surveys. Every day is changing quickly, so it's just a way to gauge the sentiment as we move forward. So there were 886 respondents that answered this first question, what is your main business type? And 49% were retailers. Of those retailers, 13.4% were roaster retailers, and 35.5% were coffee retailers. And then 14.5% were roaster wholesalers. So as we also move forward, you'll see there's a little bit of inconsistency with the number of respondents. Some people answered one question and not other questions. There were skipping. So we will show the number of respondents for each question as we go through, just as a small note there. Go ahead, next slide. So the next question we asked, how many retail outlets do you have? So those who did answer that they were a retailer, of the 886 respondents was 221. So we asked them how many retail outlets they had, and 60% said they only have one outlet. And we also asked what type of retail business they had, and 66.5% said they were coffee shops. The other options were cafe, restaurant, delivery coffee, food retailer, online coffee retail. So a large number were actual coffee shops. So then we asked what country they were from, or what country their organization was based in. So you can see here the US, there was 35.93% of respondents from the US and 11.35 from the UK, followed by 4.26 from Greece, also 4.26% Mexico, 3% Canada, 2.84% Indonesia, 2.6% Peru, and 2.13 from Colombia, and so on. You'll see it's a handful of people from other countries. So this next slide, we asked, what is your organization's annual revenue range? And there were 424 people that answered this question. And the reason we asked this is to understand, the size of the company and potentially what type of financial distress might look for them, which could be different. So we had under 100,000, 24.62% of respondents, 101 to 250, 17.34, 250 to 750,000, 19.3, 751 to 2 million, 17.84%, 3 million to 9 million is 7%, 7.5%, 10 million to 49 is 6%, 50 to 100 million, 2%, and then above 100 million was 4.52%.
I think the thing to notice here, and also on a previous slide where we asked how many outlets, you saw how high a percentage of the respondents to the survey had only one outlet, and also you can see here how small many of these businesses are. So we got a very strong response from very small businesses, and just as Heather said, we're able to, when we're analyzing this data, we're able to see how the closures, et cetera, are impacting small businesses in a different way than medium and large sized businesses.
So the next question we asked was, how has your organization been impacted by the spread of the virus, or do you expect to be impacted? So this is when it becomes a little severe and stark. There are 449 people that responded to this question, and this is of all respondents. 12% said existentially negative, so likely to go out of business. And then the 57% significantly negative impact, 18% somewhat negative, 4% minimally negative, 3% were just neutral, and then 2% were somewhat positive and also unsure.
Yeah, and I think just as Heather said, this was a stark and sobering thing to see, and of course is a really serious issue for the specialty coffee industry. Seeing that 12% number of respondents saying that they felt that they were likely to go out of business because of this situation is of course, very sobering and very serious. Also serious is this, and you'll see this consistently as we go through the next slides, this large percent, around 60 to 60% that are saying this is significantly negative, and you'll see exactly how that quantifies in upcoming slides. But yeah, this is a really, really serious issue for this vast majority of our respondents here. So then in the next few slides, we'll be going into detail on different business types. This is the overall number for all respondents, and then we'll start to go and see into individual business types.
Mm-hmm. So retailers, the 221 respondents, this was their response to that same question. 17% existentially negative, so that's a little higher than the all respondents. 61% significantly negative, somewhat negative at 13%, minimally negative 2%, and also neutral and unsure at 2%.
And just to be clear about our categories here, you can see that we differentiate between roaster retailers and coffee retailers. Here they're lumped together, but we asked people to identify themselves if they're a coffee retailer, which means that they don't roast themselves. They're typically buying coffee from another company. So this is a typical coffee shop, buying coffee from another company and selling it. And their focus is on coffee, but they're buying their roasted coffee from elsewhere. A roaster retailer is roasting and also retailing. So we lump those together because these are the retail units. And as Heather just said, this is where the biggest negative impact is. This 17% existentially negative number is. And then also the significantly negative number is higher. So this is the segment that's hurting the worst. And we'll talk more about that later.
So the roaster wholesaler group is a little smaller with 79% of the respondents. So the 6% of wholesalers existentially negative impact, 67% significantly negative, 18% somewhat negative, 1% said minimally negative, 3% said neutral, and then 5% actually said somewhat positive.
So let's explore that a little bit. I've been through each one of the responses of all of these, this entire survey. And so because I wanted to understand some of the dynamics of how these negative and neutral and positive numbers came from, became really clear that most roaster wholesalers, particularly those that have a large business base of coffee shops and food service restaurants, were extremely negatively impacted here. The ones that some of the roaster wholesalers also had strong online businesses, and that was helpful for them. And then many have, or some have strong grocery distribution. And the ones that we're talking about positivity here were the ones that had the most, apparently had, we're talking about their grocery distribution numbers being up. Of course, we're all aware that grocery sales have increased substantially with this pandemic. So, more coffee is moving through those channels now than other channels.
So on the producing side, like mills, cooperatives, producers, the group is smaller at 59 respondents. So they're saying 9% existentially negative, 55% significantly negative, 22% somewhat negative, and 14% was neutral and unsure.
And I think through reading through the comments here, I think that many producers who are, some of which, because of what we know about the coffee price crisis and some of the challenges that face the producing side of our industry, a lot of coffee producers are sort of on the edge financially anyway. I think this survey came at a time where it was not clear what the impact of COVID-19 was going to be on coffee production. So there was a lot of uncertainty expressed in these responses, and I think those since this survey, even in the days since the survey, some of those impacts have become more clear, and I think this is a place where we can do further surveying and get more information as the impacts to the producing side become more clear.
And now manufacturers and suppliers. So there were 26 respondents, and actually 0% said existentially negative impact, although 69% were saying significantly negative, 15% somewhat negative, 8% minimally negative and neutral, and then also 8% somewhat positive.
Yeah, this is interesting here as well. The 0% existentially number seems that this market segment might have been a little bit more prepared for a major disruption. But of course, that 69 significantly negative number is quite strong, and shows that these companies, and these are the companies that make coffee preparation equipment, coffee brewing equipment, coffee roasting equipment, et cetera, are feeling a strong impact as well.
So the next question we asked, which of the following impacts has your organization experienced or do you anticipate experiencing? So here the answer choices are in order of the highest number of respondents. First is reduced customer demand at almost 86%. Second was cancellation of events at 62.4%. Then increased and sustained staff absences at 40%. Shortage of supplies at 24%, production issues 22%, and then increased legal or insurance costs. So I'm not sure if there was too much of a surprise here. I'm not sure if you want to elaborate, Peter, but we sort of feel like this was to be expected in the order, especially with the reduced customer demand being at the top.
Yeah, this is the issue: is the reduction in sales. On the staff absences piece, we're hearing a lot from these business owners and managers saying that their biggest concern is staff labor issues, trying to keep people working, trying to keep people employed, et cetera. That's a top concern for them, but that's being driven by their choices there are being driven by this dramatic reduction in customer demand. So that's the big issue. On the cancellation of events, I think this was happening right around the time that SCA was announcing its cancellation of the Portland event, and so I think that was on people's minds, and it also shows that how much our industry uses events to, especially on business-to-business sales. So there's a lot of concern around that. It shows how important events are in terms of driving coffee business within our industry. Production issues are there as well. I will say that sort of supply chain concerns seemed less at the forefront here than I might have expected. So that doesn't seem to be the top concern for people. Supply chain issues seems that demand side, in other words, trying to find where the consumer demand is the big concern for people.
So this next question we asked, if your organization is already or anticipates experiencing a decrease in sales related to the virus, please list the % decrease in estimates. So initially, we did ask this question in two pieces. The first, if your organization is already experiencing a decrease in sales, and then we asked what you anticipate the decrease in sales to be. So I put these two together on this slide because there was not much of a difference. It was like 1% of each of these as I go through them. So what people are already experiencing and anticipating experiencing seems to be sort of the same at the moment. And then moving forward, and when we do further surveys, we'll also ask this question separately just to get an idea of the sentiment or what they're already experiencing versus what they're expecting to experience. So with 397 respondents, 87% of them said greater than 25% sales decrease. 68% of respondents said greater than 50% sales decrease. 36% said greater than 75% sales decrease. And 21% of respondents said greater than 90% sales decrease. So this again is where it gets pretty severe here. And throughout the comments, a lot of people were just having to shut their businesses down, which we're seeing throughout the communities. So a lot of people were saying it's actually 100% sales decrease. So we also wanted to ask about and experience an increase in expenses. So if your organization is already experiencing an increase in expenses related to the virus, please list the percent decrease. So this we are separating it out. Already and anticipate is slightly different as far as the expectation of increase in expenses. Again, the 370 or 97 respondents, 23% of them said they're seeing a greater than 25% expense increase. 14% of respondents are seeing a greater than 50% expense increase. 13% are seeing greater than 75% expense increase, and then 5% are seeing a greater than 90% expense increase. So anticipating, what are they anticipating the increase in expenses to be? So 12% saying greater than 25% expense increase. 6% of respondents are greater than 50% expense increase, and 2% for greater than 75%, also 2% for greater than 90% expense increase. So looking forward, it's a little less severe than what we're already experiencing is what people are anticipating. So for these expenses, you asked what are the primary sources of the increased expenses, if any. So there were a lot, this was an open-ended question and there were a lot of comments. So we put it into a word cloud to kind of see which was popping out to us. So you can see here supplies, cleaning, staff and labor, rent, transportation, coffee, were sort of those words that stood out as far as the increased expenses.
Yeah, and it's very clear that these companies, a big part of the increased expenses that happened are related to having to figure out how to sell things safely, how to develop new cleaning protocols, and have the labor to support that even in a time of reduced demand for their products. So that's what there was a lot of concern about supply lines per se. There was more concern about having to add on this whole set of supplies around cleaning and sanitation.
So we also asked which sales channels have been impacted. And you can see here on the left, sales to consumers in person, a almost 80% significant decrease, and then 18% minimal change, and 2.7% significant increase. And that's sales to consumers in person. So looking at sales to consumers online, it's only 17% significant decrease, but then a minimal change of 50% and 33.7% significant increase. And then also sales to businesses, the significant decrease of 74.6%, minimal change at 21%, significant increase at 4%.
And I think this is also very, very clear and also not surprising, but I think important, is that the demand curve shifted from sales for many of these companies shifted from either B2B or in-person sales, and whatever sales existed shifted to online. I will say in some of the anecdotes and also in interacting with people, there are seeing a jump in sales online, and there are the very agile companies are trying to take advantage of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go.
So the next question is, has your organization responded, or does it anticipate responding to the spread of the coronavirus in any of the following ways? So this is where communication really stuck out to us, and it's in order here. I'll read the top few. The first was staying informed via news media and updates from public health officials. So that's 76% of respondents. And then implementing more rigorous cleaning procedures, so communicating that out. Encouraging employees who feel sick to stay home, 71%. Rescheduling or canceling events, 68%. Increased digital marketing efforts at 57%. implementing a remote work policy for employees who do not need to necessarily be on site, and that was 54.5%. Emailing your newsletter subscribers about coronavirus preparedness, and that was 37.8%. Do you want me to read through the rest of them?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I think everybody can see the rest of these here, but I think I want to underscore something that you said earlier, which is it was here and also in each individual response that we started to see the importance of communication. And we started to notice that the more people were emphasizing communicating to their customers and their supply chain, their business community, the more optimistic they were about the total impacts to their business. In other words, various communication strategies seem to be a key competency here in feeling optimistic about the chances of the business surviving. So that's something that we'll come back to later as well. But as Heather said, this is where that idea started to emerge. And here, I think, is where we started to see some of the strategies emerge. Again, a lot of this information is culled from reading the individual responses and trying to correlate them to feelings of optimism or pessimism. But oftentimes we ask this question about identifying effective strategies, and that was a key part of what this work was all about, because we're not only trying to document the impact to the industry, but also see what people who are trying to identify some effective strategies so we can share them with the community, and so here's where those started to emerge as well. You can see social media is here. That falls into this communication bucket I was just mentioning. And of course, online sales appears a lot, and what we're calling the pivot to online sales. Free shipping is something that's come up a lot. That's companies trying to maximize their online sales and trying to compete in that segment effectively. So you start to see some of these terms come out here, and this is mostly and the people that responded here, a lot of the people that were responding the most negatively didn't even respond to this. So what you're seeing here is people who are finding a way through sharing some of the ways that they're able to cope. So here are some of these strategies in more of a list format. These aren't especially prioritized, but you can start to see these themes emerge. Many retailers pivoted to moving to takeout, takeaway, curbside, creating sort of takeout windows, transforming their coffee shop, food service establishment into a takeaway business. That's a key thing. Figuring out online sales, trying to get market share there through free shipping, etc. Embracing mobile ordering and delivering, Uber Eats, Postmates, these sorts of delivery. And then on the other side, the cutting of expenses, trying to reduce staff hours, etc. I will say that it's very clear that that's painful for these companies to do. They're not looking to lay off people, but they're trying to survive. They're listing it as a survival method. Some other things, taking out loans. There's in the US and in the UK, there are various loans available now to small businesses. I think in many countries there are that people are able to take advantage of. There's a lot to be said here, and in fact, in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about how we are trying to take some of these particularly effective strategies and turn them into into learning opportunities and action opportunities for companies. One thing that you should note here is the importance of sanitation and health safety has become a key competency for these retailers, and they're talking about that. Many have really embraced that and are building that as a part of their business now. I should just mention, I think a couple of people have already asked if this information will be available afterwards, and it definitely will. We'll make this available, both this webinar and also this deck as available to people. So you can keep track of these for yourselves. The ones that we identified as key strategies that seemed to come up over and over among those that were the most optimistic, or let's say the least, or relatively less negative about their prospects, were these 5 key strategies. One I've mentioned a lot and is it's fairly obvious, but it was clear that the companies that were able to pivot to online sales quickly were the ones that were able to reduce the amount of negative impact to their businesses the most, and are seeing some positive, even some positive impact there. So we see the pivot to online sales as being an especially key competency. Now, there were some had already started that, had already built an online bean sales program, for example, or some sort of online engagement and others didn't have that already in place. So we see that as a key learning that coffee companies can do to expand their online sales, even starting now through the next weeks and months. The second item here is the focus on walk-up and takeaway sales. Many retailers switched quickly into the walk-up and takeaway business. And we saw a really explosion of creativity there, and other companies weren't able to figure it out so quickly. So we think that this is a place that that companies can focus on either shifting their businesses into a walk-up and takeaway kind of environment, and building that up as a reasonable option to preserve some business during these times. Then there's a thing, Heather mentioned it before, I talked about it a little bit already, but it really surprised me how strong the emphasis was on the communication with customers, especially retail companies that are feeling buoyed by their consumer network. Their regular customers were eager to help them through this transition, recognizing that they were in pain. And those that had engaged quickly with that consumer base really did feel a positive impact from that. Also, a lot of talk about communicating with your vendor network. Everybody's concerned about their business right now, so communicating with vendors, it seems to be another key competency. That includes landlords, and I developed the impression in reading all of these that there was a kind of 2 categories. There were the businesses that sort of shut down their communication, and those that were calling everybody, and the ones that were calling everybody were able to figure out ways to survive in the environment by communicating with their network. I mentioned this earlier, which is that grocery channels have even expanded during this time. So some coffee roasters already had established grocery channels, and those that are able to optimize those have been able to even expand sales to those channels. It seems like in the coming weeks and months, there might be an opportunity for for companies to transition and try to even grow grocery channels, maybe when they didn't even have that. And then finally, home delivery is obviously growing at the moment, and so that's not done by a lot of specialty coffee companies, and this is a moment to start investigating that.
And just
So,
can I add a little bit on that,
sure.
Peter? Just that last delivery piece was not just delivering cups of coffee or coffee bags, but also like diversifying the products that people are suddenly going. It's like a pantry, coffee shop pantry. We saw a lot of that in the comments of people delivering groceries, and that communication with the customers, or just through social media, through emails, through whatever channel, I think helped the owners of the companies learn what is most needed, so they were able to offer a more diverse group of products rather than just what the coffee shop already offers.
Yeah, so as we went through all these, thanks Heather, as we went through all these, we realized that each of these key strategies, we could build some education and sharing and skill sharing around each of these topics. So what we've started to build is a webinar series that's going to focus on each of these key strategies with the aim of giving coffee businesses some advice, inspiration, tools to be able to do each of these things. So next week, we're launching 2 of these series. The first on Monday, that's about that pivot to online sales, what companies are doing to maximize their online sales, what sort of technologies are available to coffee businesses that they can use to do that, and what are sort of best practices and some opportunities in order to grow that piece. So that'll be happen on Monday. We'll have a panel of people from the industry who have some skills to share here, and we encourage you to join us there. And then next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about this walk-up and takeaway strategy, what it takes to turn your coffee business from an on-site food and beverage retailer into a takeaway. What are some successes that are happening here? How can you maximize safety in that environment, et cetera. So those are the 2 webinars that will be happening next week, and then in the subsequent weeks, we'll be doing more connected to each of those strategies, again with the aim of giving coffee businesses real tools that they can use to help survive these times. This entire series, including this episode, is being supported by La Marzocco, and we're really grateful to their support because it's making this whole series possible. And again, the idea is to try to give some support and real tools to people who are trying to navigate these challenging times. So that's it. We've got we have to wrap up at about 10 minutes, but we have a few minutes for questions here. So I've seen a couple. Let's see. I'll start with the first one. What do you recommend roasters for increasing the health of their products? Neither Heather nor I are health professionals, so we can't make specific recommendations there. What I will say is that that's the right question to ask. A lot of people are saying that consumers are clearly concerned about not only the quality of the coffee or whatever the products they're getting, but the safety of them and the safety in the way that they're able to get them. The retailers that pivoted to takeaway were saying that they were investing a lot in just communicating the way that they were making that interaction safe for their consumers. So that's the right question. I think a lot of local health authorities are making specific recommendations. We're also going to talk about that next Wednesday about some health considerations. Anything to add there, Heather?
No, I think you summed that up.
There was a question here about the government in Saudi Arabia and some support that the government were given. I mentioned small business support programs in the US and UK. There are other ones emerging. throughout the world. I would point people to, there was the question, is this going to happen in other countries? And I think the answer is yes. We've got, the SCA has a coronavirus database that is, people are submitting resources from various countries, various places, and it's being collated there. So government resources are available there. You can check that page and see if there's anything specific to your country. So I point you to that. If you go to the sca.coffee, you'll find your way to the COVID resource page. Let's see. Yes, we'll be making it available online. This webinar and also the deck that you just saw. Let's see. There's a question about insolvency of invoices for coffee supply to coffee bars. That specific thing didn't come up. I think it's still early for people to be worrying about their interactions, but I think, to me, that leads to this communication question, like how important it is to be talking to your vendors, your customers, etc. Because I think naturally a lot of people are having that worry. So. Let's see. I would like to ask, where are most of the respondents from speaking about customer in-person service? Do you have any sense of that, Heather?
I think we'd have to go back and filter to see, to filter that out. I think we were talking about all respondents, and so it broke out through all the countries.
Yeah.
So probably mostly from the US and the UK were the top two.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, I think, and it'll start to become clear, like how this is shaping out also between urban areas and, say, suburban areas, et cetera, throughout. Miguel had a question about the distribution of the sample of companies surveyed. I think we shared that in the beginning, and hopefully the slides will give you that information. So if the slides don't answer that question, please reach out to Heather or me, and we can get that for you.
Yeah, there's a lot that we could do with the filtering of the questions and the results. So if anyone does have questions that would be specific to a certain group that we didn't cover, we could dig more into it and provide that information to not only you if you want to reach out, but we can also share that on our resources page.
There was a question about if we were going to do a similar thing about the effects to coffee producers. We had about 50 coffee producing side people, and that includes producers, co-ops, and mills, answer in this survey, but it was only 50. We'd like, so yes, the short answer is yes, we're spending some energy right now starting to collect information about how this is affecting producing side. We're hearing some reports, we're trying to organize that into something coherent, and I think you can expect some communication around that as well in the coming weeks and months. It's a question that we started getting a lot this week, really. So yeah. Yeah, there's a number of questions here in this about a producer side, and those are also coming into us right now. So we know that the concern is there. We're trying to understand the challenge there is it's different in many different countries, mainly because people are at different stages in the harvest, and it of course affects people differently when they're harvesting coffee versus when the main concern is exporting. So we're collating that now, and we hope to be able to share. Last question, what do we expect from the coffee machines manufacturers? That's still becoming clear as well, particularly as the situation plays out in both China and Italy, which are both important manufacturing places for coffee equipment. And so there's still big question marks there. But I will say that there's some anecdotal stories that we've heard around sales of at-home coffee equipment. So that is coffee brewers that people are using in their kitchens, actually staying stable or even increasing at this time. And that shows good. That I think that underscores the importance of building at-home, sending beans to people kind of online businesses. And I think that's why that's a really important strategy for especially coffee roasters and retailers. People are drinking coffee at home. They're investing in equipment to drink coffee at home. And so that's an important market for us as an industry.
And I think that goes with the communication as well too, with coffee baristas or owners sharing videos on how to brew at home, and just that communication piece, not only telling the customers what they're offering, but how you can also duplicate your cup of coffee at home. So we've been seeing a lot of that too with that communication.
Okay, we have to sign off at 8:50 sharp. So we really appreciate everybody's engagement here. Heather and I are both available through SCA channels, also social media channels. Any questions? We'll make these slides available and this webinar available in the future. And please join us. Sign up for the entire series. There'll be, as I mentioned before, webinars on Monday and Wednesday. Check your listings for times. And again, I want to thank the team that supported this work, including the people that helped support the survey, but also this webinar and our pivot to providing information around this issue. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.